Today, I'm going to be demonstrating some of the basic steps I take when I'm mixing acoustic bass. The song I'll be using as an example is called Truth and Love. It's written by Andy Falco from the band The Infamous String Dusters, and it comes from their album Rise Sun, which is the album we did right after we won a Grammy for recording their album Laws of Gravity. They're literally one of the greatest groups ever, and you should check them out if you get a chance. All right, enough bragging. Check it out. Now, I used 3 different mics and a DI when I recorded this bass, and the reason I do that on acoustic bass is because they're very dynamic and inconsistent instruments. The sound can change based on what note you're playing, where you're at on the neck, what string you're hitting, and also what key of the song you're in, because when you have notes, some notes are going to be louder than others. If you change the key, it's like you might be hitting a C where you didn't hit it on another song, and I just wanted to cover my ass as well. The room can make a huge difference. Let me show you what I had there. I ended up using a Mojave 201 large diaphragm condenser. It was placed about maybe a foot or so from one of the sound holes. I also was running a DI off his bass from the pickup he uses on his live performances, and I think it was running to an Avalon DI. I also had a Sennheiser 421, probably pointing at the other sound hole, about a foot or two out. And then up on the neck, up high, I had a Josephson small diaphragm condenser. It's hard to say Josephson small diaphragm condenser to capture the string noise. So it would have been placed up here somewhere where his hand is on the bass. In the end, I ended up not using the Josephson or the 421, so I'm going to hide those. I almost always use DI when I'm recording an acoustic bass because it's going to have some low end that the mic's not going to pick up. Let me show you. Here's the DI. Here's the Mojave. And usually the DI actually kind of sounds like shit when you're actually hearing the real bass, but it's all about that low end in there. So I'm going to find some way to blend it in and fill out that low end. But here's the main issue with the DI versus the mic, and that is the DI is picking up the sound directly from the bridge. Like the minute the vibration from the string hits the bridge, it's going down that pickup on the DI and getting to the recorder literally pretty much at the speed of light. The microphone, on the other hand, it's picking up the sound of the string vibrating, it's going in the body, it's bouncing around, it's coming out. It's actually coming in later. If you look at the waveforms, all of these, like the DI here, is always earlier than the mic. Sometimes it's early enough where you can kind of hear it not just in the phase and the tone, but I've had some situations where it's like, God, I'm hearing some sort of like weird flam in there. So what I did is I slid it around until I liked the way that it sounded. It's not something you can do visually because, check it out, look how different the waveforms even look on the DI versus the mic. It's completely different. So what I did is I just slid it around and I ended up with this. It's just what sounded good. Then I went in and kind of balanced them a little bit to see, okay, I like this balance right here. So you've got the DI, then the Mojave. Then the next thing I do is I look at dynamics. I'm going to want to do a little compression or something to even out the sound before I do anything else. My go-to plugin for most basses, acoustic and electric, is this thing. This is just a built-in Fairchild 660 and Pro Tools. I love this thing. It's nothing fancy. I just set it to the fastest release here, and I make it so that on the loud sections, I may be hitting 1 or 2 dB of compression, not much, but this thing just does a neat, it kind of like makes it a little growly and it smooths it out a little bit, and I just love this. On the DI, I did something actually a little different. There was like little notes that would just poke out. Like you can see here, the microphone is a lot more consistent in volume, whereas the DI really is going up and down all over the place. So I put a limiter on it. It's not doing a bunch of crazy stuff, but it's hitting once in a while. just on the louder notes. Now at this point, I'm going to take a look at the DI signal to give it the low end and the punch. And I'm going to do that first because unlike the microphone track, which is going to have a lot of, uneven frequency response and stuff, I'm going to have to do some automation. The DI is going to be more or less a lot more consistent sonically speaking. And I want the DI to give it a lot of punch like a kick drum does because, I feel like a lot of people who mix acoustic bass and in country music and bluegrass, it's such a hard thing to get right that I think most people just kind of do a little EQ on it and kind of stick it in the background. Well, I'm not going to do that. I want my low end to punch. I want that acoustic bass to be like a kick drum. I want it to be out there because it needs to drive the band. And if you've ever been around an acoustic bass in a room with you, you'll realize how freaking powerful of an instrument this is. But most people just kind of tuck it in the background. Well, that's not going to happen here. So I'm going to take a look at the DI, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to distort it. So here's the original signal. Yeah, okay, distort it. Distortion is a great thing for bass sometimes. Now, you'll notice that it's got a big booming thing going on the low end, and that's going to happen on most of the notes to some degree. So what I did is I just kind of ducked out a little 54 hertz there, and I rolled off some subs just a little bit. Besides that, I think I had a little volume automation. Yeah, there were just a couple notes where that was booming a little bit, but that's about all I did on the DI. Now at this point, I'm going to listen down to the whole bass part, both of the tracks together, and find out which notes are jumping out or if any of them are weak. Now, before I move on with that, I'd just like to say this. I know some people are going to say, well, that's not what the bass really sounds like. It needs to be natural or whatever. It's like, dude, this is not what a bass naturally sounds like. It's a bunch of microphones pointing at a bass. It's not the same as being in the room with it. I'm just trying to better represent that. And besides, the hell with reality, man. I'm just trying to make the record sound the way I want it to sound. That's what people are hiring me for. If they don't like the way I make records sound, then they wouldn't hire me. So I'm doing what I love and how I want it to sound. So get over it. So anyway, I'm going to go down and listen to this. You'll notice that's an F. This is a C. That C is booming like crazy. And then here it goes to an A. Those are really jumping out more than the other notes. So a C is, 65? Hold on, let me pull up my frequency chart here. That C in that range is 65.4 hertz. And the A, normally you'd go for 55 hertz, but for some reason that one, it was actually 110 hertz. Now, I'll use the frequency chart as a starting point, but I'll fine tune it. I actually ended up with pulling out 65.2 hertz and 110.4, and I automated them like this. Check it out. Let me show you the automation here. You can see that I'm pulling down that 65.4 hertz, and then here, and then right here, when it gets to the A, yeah, it's a lot of work, and you'll notice that the automation, the amount that I'm pulling it down, changes from note to note based on how I'm hearing it. Oh, and here's another thing. Normally, I would do this process right here, listening to the whole band, because there's going to be some interaction there, and it's going to affect the way it sounds. For the purpose of this video, I soloed it up so you could hear it much better. This is how I went through and found the notes that I wanted to even out. It is a lot of work. And of course, nowadays, there's some easier tools. You could just grab yourself a FabFilter. It's the first one I've ever found that I thought did a good job at this. Let's go 65.4. And then this one would be, what did it say, 110 or something. Let's just do it like this. And then I'd just make them both dynamic. I'd make them fairly narrow bandwidths. And I just make sure when it's hitting that C that it's dropping down. Like I think I had it coming down like 8 or something like that. And the other one's a bit more. This is the first one I've found that's been able to do a good job of this. So let's see how this sounds. Not bad. Let me go back to what I had before. So here's the Pro Q3, and here's my other one. So first, let's listen to the Pro Q3. Now I'll try my old one. Much easier to just do this with the Pro Q3, but if you don't have that, you could actually automate the EQ down, which is what I had to do. And even if I had the Pro Q3, I would still probably be automating the amount of compression because some of it's going to be a little different and I'm kind of a perfectionist. But that's one of the main things I'm going to do to make the bass punch. That way I can turn it up a lot louder without having certain notes jump out. Before I move to the next section, I wanted to show you a couple small things I had done to the bass part. The first one was, I was noticing on the Mojave microphone that there was a little bit of extra clicking, sometimes a rattle from the strings, not in a good way. Let me play you what I got here. So what I ended up doing was putting a de-esser on there just to knock a few of those down a little bit. The other thing that I did was on one note in the bridge section, he plays this low G right here. And it just seems like, well, the bottom went away. And if you solo it up, check it out. He goes, it's just really quiet. And it's just nothing there. And I thought, well, maybe I could cut and paste from another section in the song, but there was no long sustained G like that. So what I actually ended up doing was going to another song from the album where he actually played electric bass on one song. And I think it's the only time I've ever done it with these guys on a song. So I found this and I just put it in there on that one note. So it goes, you know, just to give it some more low end on that one section. Just so that something doesn't disappear from the sub. Now, having all these different tracks for bass, what I usually do is combine them and send them to an auxiliary return or a bus. Let me show you on my mixer here. You can see right here, the 3 bass tracks are all going to this return right here so that I can control them all together with one volume. But I also want to be able to do more EQ work to the bass part as a whole, all the tracks together. And I noticed that there are still a couple frequencies that were jumping out a little bit. You can see right here that I did a little more work just to all the tracks together. And of course, you could use a FabFilter Pro Q3 or a really good multi-band compressor, I guess, to take care of some of that. I have done that. I just find that sometimes, you know, even if I'm very selectively selecting a frequency, that it's still kind of pushing that out on other notes when I don't want that to happen. So sometimes I still use this process so I can get exactly what I want. After I did that, the only other thing I did was I added a little saturation here to the bass part as a whole into the mix because I feel like a touch bit of that will just warm it up and bring it forward a little bit. Well, that's pretty much the basics of how I mix an acoustic bass. I hope you liked the episode. Come back for more. I'm going to be showing more about other acoustic instruments. And remember to subscribe and always be unique.